Scary telling.
I was devastated when I received my diagnosis. The doctor told me I had a terminal illness and gave me a negative prognosis. I didn't know what to do or where to turn. That's when a close friend told me about Dr. Jeremiah Magnuson. I was skeptical at first, as I had never heard of Dr. Magnuson before. But my friend was insistent that he was the real deal and that he had cured many people of all kinds of diseases and sicknesses. With only months to live, I felt I had nothing to lose and decided to give it a try. I contacted Dr. Magnuson and agreed to meet with him. He was located on a farm in a remote area, which was a bit concerning, but I went anyway. When I arrived, I was surprised to see that the farm was bustling with activity. There were many people working on the fields and tending to the herds. Dr. Magnuson greeted me warmly and showed me around the farm. He explained that he had been working for over 40 years to develop a revolutionary herbal supplement that cures all diseases and sicknesses from the body with no side effects. He provided me with herbal medication free of charge during our consultation and told me that if I believed, I would be cured from the disease. I was amazed at his generosity, but still skeptical. How could a simple herbal medicine cure a disease that modern medicine could not? But I decided to take the herbal medicine as instructed and see what happened. To my surprise, the medicine began to work almost immediately. Within a few days, I began to feel better. Within a week, my symptoms had disappeared. Within a month, I was completely cured without any side effects. I was astounded. Dr. Magnuson had given me back my life, and I was forever grateful. He had worked tirelessly to develop a cure for all diseases, and it seemed he had succeeded. I was so grateful that I decided to work for him on the farm as a way to repay his kindness. Working on the farm was hard, but I didn't mind. I felt strong and healthy, and I was happy to be doing something meaningful. The other workers on the farm were all cured by Dr. Magnuson as well, and they spoke only of how grateful they were to him. I began to see him as a savior, a man who had dedicated his life to curing others. It wasn't until later that I began to experience strange side effects from the herbal medicine. But at the time, I felt that I had been given a second chance at life, and I was grateful for it. As I continued working on Dr. Magnuson's farm, I began to notice some strange things. The other workers, who had also been cured by Dr. Magnuson, seemed to be in a trance-like state. They spoke only of how grateful they were to the doctor and seemed to have no other interests or concerns. I also began experiencing vivid nightmares that left me feeling exhausted and terrified. In my dreams, I saw Dr. Magnuson performing strange rituals with the herbs and chanting in an unknown language. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. At first, I thought the nightmares were just a side effect of the herbal medicine. But as time went on, they became more frequent and intense. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat and saw Dr. Magnuson standing at the foot of my bed. His eyes were dark and empty, and he was holding a vial of the herbal medicine. "You must continue taking the medicine, Patrick," he said in a monotone voice. "It is the only way to stay cured." I was terrified. Dr. Magnuson had never visited me in my room before, and I couldn't understand how he had gotten in. I tried to ask him questions, but he just repeated the same thing over and over again. After that night, I started to question Dr. Magnuson's methods. The nightmares continued, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I began researching him and the herbal medicine, but I didn't find much. Dr. Magnuson seemed to be a mysterious figure with little information available about him online or in any medical journals. The other workers on the farm didn't seem to notice anything unusual. They continued to work and praised Dr. Magnuson as if nothing was wrong. I felt like I was going crazy. One day, I decided to talk to one of the other workers about my concerns. He seemed sympathetic at first, but as soon as I mentioned Dr. Magnuson's name, he became defensive. He told me that I had nothing to worry about, that Dr. Magnuson had cured him and he was grateful for it. I realized then that something was not right. The workers on the farm were all under Dr. Magnuson's control in some way. I didn't know how or why, but I knew that I needed to find out more. The nightmares continued, and they only got worse. I started to feel like I was being watched all the time, like Dr. Magnuson was always watching me. I couldn't sleep, and I started to feel like I was losing my mind. It wasn't until I met someone outside of the farm who had a similar experience that I realized what was happening. She had been cured by Dr. Magnuson as well, but had noticed strange side effects and nightmares just like I had. She told me that Dr. Magnuson had been experimenting on unsuspecting patients for decades, using a potent hallucinogen in a medicine that induced a trance-like state and made the patients more susceptible to suggestion. My worst fears were confirmed. Dr. Magnuson was not the savior I thought he was. He was a twisted scientist, using his cured patients as a labor force to grow more herbs and further his experiments. I knew then that I had to find a way to escape from the farm before it was too late. As soon as I realized what Dr. Magnuson was doing, I knew that I needed to do something to stop him. I began investigating him and the origins of the herbal medicine, trying to gather as much information as I could. It wasn't easy. Dr. Magnuson was very secretive, and there wasn't much information available about him online or in any medical journals. But I was determined to find out the truth. I started by talking to the other workers on the farm. At first, they were hesitant to talk to me. They seemed to be in a trance-like state, just like I had been. But after some prodding, they began to open up to me. They told me about their experiences with Dr. Magnuson, about the nightmares and strange side effects they had experienced. I also began researching the herbs that Dr. Magnuson was growing on the farm. I found out that they were not native to the area, and that they were known for their potent hallucinogenic properties. As I continued my investigation, I started to notice that Dr. Magnuson was becoming more suspicious of me. He would ask me questions about what I was doing and why I was asking so many questions. I knew that I had to be careful, or he would catch on to what I was doing. One day, I discovered a hidden room on the farm. It was locked, but I managed to pick the lock and get inside. What I found inside was shocking. There were all kinds of strange tools and equipment, as well as books on herbal medicine and ancient rituals. It was clear that Dr. Magnuson was up to something sinister. But as I was leaving the room, I was caught by one of Dr. Magnuson's assistants. He was a big, burly man, and he didn't look happy to see me. I tried to explain that I was just looking around, but he wasn't buying it. He took me to Dr. Magnuson, and I knew that my cover was blown. Dr. Magnuson was furious with me. He accused me of spying on him and trying to steal his secrets. I tried to explain that I was just curious, but he didn't want to hear it. He ordered me to leave the farm immediately, and I knew that I was lucky to get out alive. As I left the farm, I realized that I had put myself in danger. Dr. Magnuson was not to be trifled with, and I knew that he would stop at nothing to protect his secrets. But I was determined to find a way to stop him, no matter what it took. After my confrontation with Dr. Magnuson, I knew that I had to leave the farm immediately. I packed my bags and tried to slip away unnoticed, but it wasn't that easy. Dr. Magnuson had eyes everywhere, and I knew that he would be looking for me. As I made my way through the woods, I could hear the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw one of Dr. Magnuson's assistants, a man I had seen working on the farm. He was coming towards me with a menacing look on his face. I started to run, but he was fast. He tackled me to the ground and started to punch me in the face. I tried to fight back, but he was too strong. I thought it was over for me, but then something amazing happened. One of the other workers on the farm appeared out of nowhere and started to fight off the assistant. He was a small man, but he was fast and nimble. He punched the assistant in the gut and then kicked him in the face. The assistant fell to the ground, and the worker helped me up. "We have to go," he said. "Dr. Magnuson is looking for us." We started to run through the woods, trying to evade Dr. Magnuson and his followers. We could hear the sound of footsteps behind us, but we kept going. We ran for what felt like hours, until we finally reached a small town. We collapsed in a heap on the ground, exhausted and scared. We didn't know what to do next. We were fugitives, running from a powerful man who had a lot to lose. But we knew that we had to keep going. We couldn't let Dr. Magnuson get away with what he was doing. We had to find a way to stop him, no matter what it took. We decided to seek out the authorities and tell them what we had discovered. We went to the local police station and told them everything. They seemed skeptical at first, but as we told them more, they started to take us seriously. They sent a team to investigate Dr. Magnuson and the farm, and what they found was shocking. They discovered evidence of his twisted experiments and the potent hallucinogens he was using to control his patients. They also found evidence of the other workers on the farm who had been brainwashed into working for him. Dr. Magnuson was arrested and charged with multiple counts of medical malpractice and abuse. The authorities shut down his farm and his experiments, and the world learned the truth about what he was doing. As for me and the other workers, we were hailed as heroes. We had stood up to a powerful man and exposed his crimes. We had put ourselves in danger, but we had done the right thing. But the nightmares continued. Even though Dr. Magnuson was behind bars, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me. I knew that I had to confront my fears and put them to rest, once and for all. And so, I decided to use my experience to help others who had been victimized by Dr. Magnuson. I became an advocate for ethical medical practices, and I worked tirelessly to make sure that no one else would suffer like we did. It wasn't easy, but I knew that it was the right thing to do. I had been given a second chance at life, and I was determined to make the most of it. The nightmares still haunted me, but I was strong enough to face them. And in the end, that was all that mattered. After Dr. Magnuson was arrested and his experiments were exposed, the world was shocked. His patients, who had believed that he was a savior, were devastated to learn the truth about the herbal medicine and the strange side effects it caused. I became a spokesperson for the victims, working with medical professionals and lawmakers to ensure that what had happened would never happen again. We lobbied for stricter regulations and ethical guidelines for medical practitioners to prevent anyone else from being victimized by unscrupulous doctors. But even with all the progress we had made, the aftermath of Dr. Magnuson's experiments continued to haunt me. I still had vivid nightmares, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. One day, I received a package in the mail. It was a vial of the herbal medicine that Dr. Magnuson had used to cure me. I didn't know who had sent it or why, but I knew that I had to destroy it. I took the vial into the woods and buried it deep in the ground. As I was walking away, I heard a voice behind me. It was Dr. Magnuson, and he looked just like he had the last time I had seen him. "You can't escape me, Patrick," he said. "I am always watching." I tried to run, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. Dr. Magnuson started to approach me, his eyes dark and empty. I thought it was the end for me, but then something amazing happened. The other workers from the farm appeared out of nowhere, surrounding Dr. Magnuson. They had come to protect me, to make sure that he couldn't hurt me anymore. Dr. Magnuson screamed and thrashed, but he was no match for the workers. They subdued him and handed him over to the authorities. I knew then that I was finally safe. The nightmares started to fade after that. I knew that Dr. Magnuson was behind bars and that he couldn't hurt me anymore. I still had scars, both physical and emotional, but I was determined to move on. And so, I did. I went back to school and studied medicine, determined to become a doctor who would always put his patients first. I worked with other victims of medical malpractice, helping them to heal and move forward. I never forgot what had happened to me and the other patients of Dr. Magnuson. But I also knew that I couldn't let it define me. I had been given a second chance at life, and I was determined to make the most of it. In the end, that was all that mattered. The nightmares and the memories would always be with me, but I was stronger than they were. I had survived, and I would continue to survive, no matter what life threw my way.